The pearl-white Maserati Quattroporte announced itself 3 blocks before it appeared. That unmistakable twin-turbo growl rolling through Chicago's industrial district like thunder through a canyon. Mechanics who'd worked these streets for decades recognized the sound, and more importantly, they recognized what it meant. Miguel Santos, elbow deep in a BMW transmission at European imports, didn't need to see the license plate. He grabbed his youngest tech by the shoulder, spoke one word, "close," and within 90 seconds, the bay doors were sliding shut, the closed sign flipped, lights dimmed. 2 blocks down, Frank Morrison heard it too, abandoned a half-finished oil change on a Lexus, locked his front gate before the white demon even turned onto their street. By the time the Quattroporte prowled past Rivers Automotive, 7 shops had gone dark, their owners suddenly remembering urgent appointments, family emergencies, any excuse that didn't involve the woman behind that wheel. Garrett Thomas Rivers didn't hear the engine. He sat in his father's office, what used to be his father's office, staring at numbers that refused to improve, no matter how many times he recalculated them. $8,200 in the register. Rent due in 14 days, $12,500. Utilities, insurance. The equipment loan his father had signed 3 months before the diagnosis. Another $6,000 stacked on top. The calculator sat beside 3 months of declining revenue reports, each one a fresh confirmation that Chicago's wealthy car owners wanted Wyatt Rivers, the legend who'd rebuilt Ferraris for Saudi princes and diagnosed Lamborghini failures that stumped factory engineers. They didn't want his 34-year-old son, no matter how many certifications hung on the wall, no matter that Wyatt had spent 15 years transferring every technique, every instinct, every hard-won secret to the boy who'd grown up sleeping under workbenches and dreaming in torque specifications. The bills blurred. Garrett pressed his palms against his eyes, felt the calluses earned through 10,000 oil changes, brake jobs, transmission rebuilds, all the honest work that used to fill this shop before the heart attack took Wyatt 8 months ago, took him right here, in Bay 3, in the middle of diagnosing a misfire on a vintage Porsche 911, went down with a wrench still in his hand and oil still on his coveralls, exactly how he would have wanted it if anyone had bothered to ask. The funeral had been standing room only. The clients had disappeared within 6 weeks. Daddy. The voice cut through his calculations, small and careful, the way Lily always sounded when she was worried about him worrying. She stood in the doorway connecting the shop to their apartment upstairs, 8 years old, with her grandfather's dark eyes and her mother's gentle heart. Rachel had been gone 3 years now. Cancer that moved too fast for the doctors to catch, too aggressive for the treatments to stop. Lily had been too young to remember much beyond photographs and the stories Garrett told her on nights when missing her mother became too heavy to carry alone. "Are you sad again?" Garrett forced his face into something resembling calm. "Just thinking, sweetheart." "Homework done?" Lily didn't move from the doorway. Her fingers twisted the hem of her school uniform. "Mrs. Patterson said something at pickup today. She said her husband isn't bringing his Cadillac here anymore because Grandpa isn't here to fix it. She said, 'You're too young, that you don't know what you're doing.'" The words landed like hammer blows. Robert Patterson had been bringing that Cadillac to Wyatt for 12 years. Trusted him with everything from routine maintenance to a complete engine rebuild after Patterson's grandson took it joyriding and blew the head gasket. Garrett had done half the work on that rebuild himself, with Wyatt supervising, teaching, correcting every mistake until the tolerances were perfect. Patterson knew that, had watched it happen, still walked away the moment the name on the sign was just Rivers, not Wyatt Rivers, master technician. Garrett crossed to his daughter, knelt down so they were eye to eye. Mrs. Patterson doesn't know what she's talking about, baby. And you know what Grandpa always said about people who judge before they understand? Their words are cheap because they've never paid the price to learn. Lily recited it perfectly, word for word, the way Wyatt used to say it. But Daddy, why don't they give you a chance to show them? You know everything Grandpa knew. You told me so. I do know it, Garrett promised, pulling her into a hug that was more for himself than her. Sometimes people need time to see that. We just have to be patient. Lily squeezed him tight, then pulled back with that too-old wisdom that sometimes frightened him. Grandpa said patience without action is just waiting to fail. You have to do something. Before Garrett could respond, before he could figure out what 8-year-old philosophy he was supposed to counter with, the Maserati's engine cut out directly in front of the shop. The sudden silence felt weighted, ominous. Through the grimy front window, Garrett watched the driver's door open and a woman emerge like a declaration of war. Victoria Eleanor Sterling wore power the way other people wore cologne. Deliberately, expensively, impossible to ignore. The Chanel suit was cream-colored and probably cost more than Garrett's monthly rent. Louboutin heels added 4 inches to her already imposing frame, red soles flashing like warning signals with each step. The Birkin bag cost more than his truck, he knew that much. Had seen enough wealthy clients over the years to recognize the hierarchy of handbags. But it was her face that stopped him. The way her jaw was set. The way her eyes scanned his shop like a general surveying a battlefield already lost. This was a woman who'd spent too long being disappointed by experts, too many hours being condescended to by men who thought her money made her stupid. This was a woman who'd learned that rage was the only language that got results. Garrett released Lily gently. Go upstairs, sweetheart. I've got a customer. Lily glanced through the window, took in the Maserati, the woman, the whole scene with those unsettling, perceptive eyes. Is she going to yell at you like Mr. Patterson did? Probably, but that's okay. Not all customers know how to ask for help nicely. Lily kissed his cheek and disappeared up the stairs. Garrett ran a hand through his hair, clocked his reflection in the small mirror by the door. Flannel shirt with a frayed collar, jeans with permanent grease stains on the thighs, work boots that had been resoled twice. He looked exactly like what he was, a working mechanic in a dying shop. He looked nothing like what Victoria Sterling expected from someone about to touch her $60,000 Italian automobile. He stepped outside. The September afternoon was warm, the kind of late summer heat that made the city smell like hot asphalt and diesel exhaust. Victoria was already at his door, one manicured hand on the frame, her expression cycling between fury and desperate hope in the way of someone who'd tried everything and found only failure. Is this supposed to be a mechanic shop? Her voice could have cut glass, because it looks more like a storage unit with a sign. Garrett kept his voice level, professional, the way Wyatt had taught him. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Garrett Rivers. How can I help you? You can start by telling me where Wyatt Rivers is. I was told he was the only competent mechanic in this miserable city. The words hit harder than she could have known. Wyatt was my father. He passed away 8 months ago. I run the shop now. Victoria looked him up and down, the assessment instant and brutal. Her laugh came out sharp, humorless. Of course, the legend is dead, and his replacement is some kid who probably still calls his mother when he can't figure out how to change a tire. Garrett took a breath, swallowed the retort that wanted to come. I'm 34, ma'am. Fully certified in European luxury vehicles. I trained under my father for 15 years. I can help you with whatever. I don't care about your training. Victoria cut him off with a wave of her hand, dismissive as swatting a fly. Training means nothing. Results are what matter. How many Maseratis have you fixed? Complete repairs, not oil changes. Honesty had been drilled into Garrett since childhood. Wyatt used to say a mechanic's reputation was built on trust, and trust was built on truth, even when the truth cost you business. This would be my first complete Maserati repair. Victoria threw her hands up, and for a moment, Garrett saw past the armor to the exhaustion underneath, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd fought the same battle too many times. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I've already wasted $400,000 on 50 different mechanics who swore they knew what they were doing. Why not add one more failure to the list? 400,000. The number was obscene. Garrett owned a truck worth maybe $8,000 on a good day, lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above a garage, paid for his daughter's school clothes at Goodwill. This woman had spent $400,000 trying to fix one car and was standing in his shop acting like he was wasting her time. Do you have a hearing problem? Victoria's voice rose. Yes, 400,000. The official Maserati dealership, the fancy European import specialists, the racing shop that charges $500 an hour. Every single one of them took my money and accomplished nothing. She started pacing, heels cracking against the sidewalk like gunshots. The dealership blamed my driving style. The import specialist said I was probably imagining the problems. 3 different mechanics suggested I should send my husband to deal with this instead. She spun to face him, and Garrett saw real pain flash across her face before the anger covered it again. I don't have a husband. I have a company worth $2 billion that I built from nothing. I have 1,600 employees whose livelihoods depend on my decisions. I have a board meeting in Dubai next week that could make or break a $300 million deal. But apparently, I'm too female to understand what's wrong with my own car. Garrett stood still, listening. Sometimes that was all people needed, someone to actually hear them instead of immediately defending or explaining or dismissing. Wyatt had taught him that too, the value of silence, the power of paying attention. So here I am, Victoria continued, her voice dropping to something dangerous. Mechanic number 51. And you're telling me you've never even worked on a Maserati before. She stepped closer, close enough that Garrett could see the makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, the fine lines of stress around her mouth. Give me one reason why I shouldn't drive straight to the next shop and waste my time there instead. Garrett met her eyes. Something shifted in his chest, some combination of desperation and pride, and the memory of his father's voice saying, "Son, sometimes the hardest jobs are the ones worth taking, because I won't charge you anything unless I fix it." Victoria blinked. What? You heard me. If I solve the problem, you pay me a fair price. If I fail, you owe me nothing. Not even for my time. That's ridiculous. No one offers terms like that. I do. Why? What's the catch? Garrett took a breath. If he was going to gamble everything, he might as well be honest about it. I need this job. I'm 3 weeks away from losing this shop, losing everything my father built. I have a daughter upstairs who thinks I can do anything, and every day I'm terrified I'm going to prove her wrong. He gestured at the Maserati. You've got a car that nobody can fix. I've got skills that nobody will trust. Maybe we can help each other." Victoria stared at him. The rage in her eyes flickered, shifted into something else. Recognition, maybe, or curiosity, or the faintest hint of respect. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. My father used to say that's the Rivers family curse." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. A CTA bus rumbled past on the street behind them. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed and went silent. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the cracked concrete of the shop's parking area. "1 week," Victoria said finally, her voice different now, still hard but less sharp. "You have 7 days. If you haven't fixed it by then, you give me back the car, and I find mechanic number 52. Fair enough. I'll come every day at 6 p.m. to check your progress. I want detailed reports. No technical jargon designed to confuse me. No vague excuses about parts or testing or any of the other garbage I've heard for 2 months. Understood." Victoria reached into her car and pulled out a leather folder thick enough to be a manuscript. "This is everything. 50 diagnoses, 50 invoices, 50 different theories about what's wrong." She thrust it toward him. "Maybe you'll find something they all missed. Or maybe you'll just be failure number 51. Garrett took the folder. It was heavy, months of frustration compressed into paper and ink, a graveyard of expert opinions and expensive mistakes. He could feel the weight of it, not just physical, but the accumulated expectation, the pressure of being the last hope after 50 others had failed. Victoria handed him the keys. Her fingers brushed against his palm for a fraction of a second. "Don't call me ma'am. It makes me feel ancient." "My name is Victoria." "Garrett, I know. You said that already." She turned toward the street to hail a cab. "And Garrett, if you damage my car, I will destroy you. I was a corporate lawyer before I became an investor. I've ended careers. I've bankrupted companies. I've made grown men cry in depositions. Don't test me. I won't damage your car. We'll see." A taxi pulled up. Victoria climbed in without looking back. The door slammed, and the cab disappeared into the flow of afternoon traffic. Garrett stood alone on the sidewalk with a pearl-white Maserati Quattroporte and 7 days to do the impossible. Above him, through the second-floor window, he could see Lily watching, her small hand pressed against the glass. She waved. He waved back. Then he looked down at the keys in his hand, at the folder heavy with failure, and up at the photograph of Wyatt Rivers that hung just inside the shop door, his father in coveralls, holding a wrench, smiling that quiet smile that said he knew something the world hadn't figured out yet. "Okay, Dad." Garrett spoke to the photo, to the memory, to whatever part of Wyatt still lived in these walls and tools and the skills he'd passed down. "Help me see what I'm missing." The Maserati sat gleaming in the late afternoon sun, beautiful and broken, waiting. Garrett started with the folder. Not the car, not the engine, not even a preliminary inspection. Just the documentation, because Wyatt had taught him that half of diagnosing a problem was understanding what everyone else had tried and why they'd failed. He spread the invoices across his father's workbench, 50 sheets of expensive letterhead from Chicago's most prestigious automotive shops, each one a testament to expertise that hadn't been enough. Official Maserati dealership, first on the list. Direct injection system fault. Replaced all 6 injectors at a cost of $85,000. Garrett traced the technical notes with one grease-stained finger, saw where they'd run every diagnostic protocol, found fault codes that pointed to fuel delivery issues, swapped components that should have fixed it. Should have. Didn't. European import specialist, Second attempt. ECU malfunction. Complete reprogramming. $60,000. They'd gone deeper, suspected the engine control unit itself had corrupted data, wiped it clean, and reinstalled factory software. Professional work, methodical, exactly what the manual specified. Problem persisted. Racing performance shop, third strike. Turbocharger boost leak, replaced both turbos, $95,000. Premium parts, expert installation, dyno testing to verify proper operation. Car ran worse after than before. The list went on. Fuel pump, oxygen sensors, transmission control module, wiring harness, throttle body, mass airflow sensor, camshaft position sensors. Every mechanic had found something different, something legitimate, something that absolutely should have solved the issue based on the symptoms Victoria described. Every mechanic had been confident. Every mechanic had been wrong. Garrett closed the folder and walked to the Maserati. He didn't open the hood, didn't plug in a diagnostic scanner, didn't start the engine. He just looked, the way Wyatt used to look at a troubled car, seeing beyond components to the relationship between them, listening for the story the machine was trying to tell. The engine bay was a museum of new parts, injectors still showing factory shine, turbos without a scratch, sensors with manufacturing dates from the last 8 weeks. This engine had been practically rebuilt piece by piece, part by part, by 50 different mechanics who knew their trade. And that gave Garrett his first real clue. If they'd replaced almost everything and the problem still existed, then the problem wasn't a bad part. It was something else entirely. Something in the system itself. Something in how all those new components were talking to each other. The mechanical hardware was fine, probably better than fine given the quality of replacements Victoria's money had bought, which meant the issue lived somewhere else. Somewhere most mechanics didn't think to look because they'd been trained to find broken things and replace them. A car is a conversation, son. Wyatt's voice echoed in his memory, clear as if his father stood beside him at the workbench. Every part is speaking to every other part. Your job isn't to shout louder, it's to listen to what they're already saying. Garrett was still listening when Lily came downstairs carrying her homework and a peanut butter sandwich. She'd changed out of her school uniform into old jeans and one of Wyatt's shop shirts, sleeves rolled up about 15 times. The logo for Rivers Automotive stretched across her narrow chest. She climbed onto the stool by the workbench, took a bite of sandwich, watched her father stare at the Maserati with that expression she recognized from when he was working through a difficult problem. What's wrong with it? Her voice was casual, but Garrett knew she was studying him as carefully as he was studying the car. That's what I'm trying to figure out, sweetheart. 50 mechanics couldn't solve it. That's a lot of very smart people being very wrong. Lily swung her legs, thinking. Grandpa used to say that when everyone gets the same answer wrong, maybe they're asking the wrong question. Garrett looked at his daughter, felt that familiar mixture of pride and heartbreak that came from watching her channel Wyatt's wisdom. You're right. They were all asking what's broken. Maybe I should be asking what changed. He grabbed his laptop, opened the manufacturer's technical documentation for the Quattro Ports engine management system. Modern luxury cars weren't just mechanical anymore. They were rolling computers, running millions of lines of code, making thousands of decisions per second about fuel mixture and ignition timing and turbo boost and 100 other variables. And like any computer, they learned, adapted, built profiles based on driving patterns and fuel quality and ambient temperature and altitude, the adaptive learning tables. Garrett spoke it out loud, the realization crystallizing. The ECU doesn't just follow fixed programming. It adjusts constantly based on what it's experiencing, builds a map of normal operation, compensates for variations. So, Lily took another bite of sandwich. So what happens if the car develops a problem and the computer starts compensating for it? It learns wrong. It adapts to dysfunction. Then someone fixes the original problem, but the computer doesn't know that. It keeps compensating for something that's no longer there, and those compensations create new symptoms. Lily nodded slowly, like when I broke my arm and started using my left hand for everything. And even after the cast came off, I kept reaching with the wrong hand because I'd gotten used to it. Exactly like that. Garrett felt the pieces clicking together. The first mechanic fixed something real, but the computer had already learned to work around it. The second mechanic saw the compensation behaviors and thought they were new problems, replaced more parts. The computer learned from that too, adapted again, created more symptoms. Third mechanic, fourth mechanic, 50th mechanic. Each one adding layers, teaching the computer more wrong patterns until the whole system was so corrupted with bad adaptations that nobody could tell what the original problem had been. How do you fix it? Lily asked. You have to wipe everything. Not just reprogram the computer like the import specialist tried. You have to erase all the adaptive memory, every learned behavior, every compensation. Reset it to factory zero, like it just rolled off the assembly line. Then you teach it to run correctly from scratch. Can you do that? Garrett hesitated. This was the part he'd been dreading. The official Maserati diagnostic software costs $5,000 for the license. I don't have that kind of money. Lily's face fell. So we can't help her. I didn't say that. Garrett pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts until he found the name he needed. I know someone who might be able to help. Callum Brooks answered on the third ring, his voice wary the way it always was when Garrett called during work hours. This better not be you asking me to cover poker night again, Rivers. I'm still recovering from the last time. I need a favor. A big one. The wariness sharpened into concern. How big? I need to borrow the Maserati diagnostic laptop. Unofficially, for about 6 hours. Silence on the line. The kind of silence that meant Callum was calculating risks, running scenarios, trying to figure out if Garrett had lost his mind. You're asking me to risk my job. I know. The dealership has cameras, inventory tracking, managers who notice when expensive equipment goes missing. I know. If anyone finds out, we both go down. You for theft, me for being an accessory. I know what I'm asking, Cal. Garrett kept his voice steady, calm, the way you'd talk to someone standing on a ledge. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. How important? Important enough that if I don't do this, I lose the shop. I lose everything my dad built. I lose the only way I know how to take care of my daughter. More silence. Garrett could hear machinery in the background, the familiar sounds of a dealership service bay, air tools and engine diagnostics, and the low hum of ventilation systems. He could picture Callum standing there in his tech uniform, phone pressed to his ear, doing the mental math on 15 years of friendship versus job security. I work night shift tomorrow, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Callum's voice was resigned, the tone of a man who already knew he was going to say yes, even though every rational part of his brain was screaming no. I can leave the laptop in my locker. You pick it up at 11, return it by 5. That gives you 6 hours. That's enough. If anyone finds out, we both go down. No one will find out. You better be right, Rivers. You better be damn right. The line went dead. Garrett set the phone down, felt the weight of what he'd just asked, the risk he'd placed on someone else's shoulders. Callum had a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage in Naperville. He'd worked at that dealership for 8 years, built seniority, earned respect. One mistake, one missing piece of equipment, one manager asking the wrong questions, and all of that disappeared. Is Mr. Brooks going to get in trouble? Lily's voice was small. Not if I'm careful. Not if everything goes exactly right. And if it doesn't go right? Garrett looked at his daughter, at those eyes that saw too much and understood too well. Then I've hurt someone who trusted me. That's the risk we take when we ask people to believe in us, sweetheart. We owe them our very best effort. The next day crawled past with the particular torture of waiting for something you can't control. Garrett cleaned every electrical connector in the engine bay, checked every ground point, tested every wire with his multimeter. Tedious work, slow work, the kind of foundation building that most mechanics skipped because customers didn't want to pay for prevention. They wanted broken things fixed now. But Wyatt had taught him that shortcuts led to callbacks, that doing something right took patience, that the difference between a mechanic and a master was in the details nobody else bothered with. At 3:30, Lily came home from school. She found him under the Maserati, tracing a wiring harness for the 14th time, looking for any sign of damage or corrosion or poor connection that might have started this whole cascade of problems months ago. "Daddy," she called down to him, "are you going to fix the pretty car today?" "Tonight, sweetheart. I have to do something special tonight. Can I help?" Garrett slid out from under the car, his back protesting, his shoulders tight from hours in uncomfortable positions. "Not this time, baby. But you can help by being extra good tonight. Mrs. Brennan from next door is going to stay with you while I work late." "The lady who always smells like cinnamon rolls?" "That's the one." Lily paused, her expression shifting into that too serious mode that meant she was about to say something important. "Daddy, the car lady who was yelling yesterday, I saw her come back when you were in the bathroom." Garrett tensed. "What did she do?" "She didn't see me, but I saw her. She was looking at Grandpa's picture on the wall, the one where he's holding me when I was a baby." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper, like she was sharing a secret. She was crying. The information hit Garrett sideways. Didn't match the image of the Ice Queen in Louboutin heels who'd nearly bitten his head off yesterday. She was crying? Just a little. Like she was trying not to. Like when you cry in your room at night and think I can't hear. Like Mom used to cry when she was sick and thought you weren't looking. Garrett had no response to that. No way to process the image of Victoria Sterling standing in his shabby shop, looking at a photograph of a dead mechanic holding his granddaughter, crying. People carried their grief in strange ways, hid their broken places behind armor and anger and the kind of control that looked like strength, but was really just fear wearing a different mask. Rachel had done the same thing, pretending everything was fine until the pain medication stopped working and the pretending became impossible. "I think she's sad," Lily continued, "like we were sad when Mom died, like we were sad when Grandpa died. I think she needs a friend, out of the mouths of babes. Maybe you're right, sweetheart. You should be her friend, Daddy. Grandpa always said the best way to fix something broken is to care about it. That's what he told me when Mom was sick. He said he couldn't fix what was wrong with her, but he could make sure she never felt alone." Garrett pulled his daughter into a hug, wondered when exactly she'd gotten so wise, when she'd learned to see past surfaces to the truth underneath. "When did you get so smart?" "I learned from watching you and Grandpa, and Mom. She was smart too. the smartest. At 6 o'clock, Victoria arrived exactly as promised, stepping out of a different car, a Mercedes S-Class this time, probably from her company fleet. They fixed it, charged you $85,000, sent you on your way. But by the time you brought the car to them, the engine computer had already been compensating for that problem, maybe for weeks or months. It had learned wrong patterns, built adaptations around the failure. Victoria leaned in, studying the engine with more focus than Garrett expected. So fixing the injector didn't fix the adaptations. Exactly. The computer kept running its learned behaviors even though the original problem was gone. Those behaviors created new symptoms. Second mechanic saw those symptoms, diagnosed a different problem, replaced the ECU. But the new ECU inherited some of the old adaptations through the network and added its own compensations. Third mechanic, fourth, 50th. Each one layering more corrections on top of corrections, until the whole system is so confused that nobody can find the beginning of the thread. Victoria straightened, met his eyes. It's like trauma. The original wound healed, but the response to the wound became the new problem. Garrett stared at her, surprised by the metaphor, by the depth of understanding in it. That's exactly what it is. So what do? We have to wipe everything. Not just reprogram like the import specialist tried. We have to erase all the adaptive memory, every learned behavior, every compensation the computer has built up. We reset it to factory zero and then teach it how to run correctly from scratch. Can you do that? Garrett hesitated, caught between honesty and hope. The official software costs $5,000 and requires dealership credentials. I don't have either, but I have a friend who's going to let me borrow the laptop tonight. Unofficially. Victoria studied him, and Garrett saw the calculations happening behind her eyes, the legal training that made her automatically assess risks and liabilities. You're talking about doing something not entirely legal. I'm talking about borrowing equipment from a friend to help a client. It's a gray area. A small smile crossed Victoria's face, genuine this time, almost warm. I spent 15 years as a corporate lawyer. I know all about gray areas. The smile faded. Is your friend going to get in trouble? Not if I'm careful, not if I do everything right. And if you're not careful, then we both pay the price. But that's on me, not you. Victoria was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight Garrett hadn't heard before. Something vulnerable underneath the executive polish. You could have lied. You could have told me you had all the equipment you needed, taken my money, and I never would have known the risk you were taking. My father taught me that a mechanic's reputation is built on trust, and trust is built on truth, even when the truth costs you business. Victoria's eyes glistened, just for a second before she blinked it away. I respect that. What time tonight? I pick up the laptop at 11 p.m. The reset will take a few hours. Then I have to do what's called a learning cycle. Drive the car about 50 miles in a very specific way, teaching the computer how all the new parts actually behave. None of the other mechanics mentioned anything like that. Because it takes time. Hours of careful driving. You can't bill for that the same way you can bill for replacing parts. Most shops want quick fixes, because quick fixes generate quick revenue. Victoria exhaled slowly, a sound that might have been frustration or respect or some combination of both. My father was a mechanic. Garrett blinked, surprised. What? He owned a small shop in Detroit. Nothing fancy, just honest work for honest people. She looked at the Maserati, and her expression shifted into something Garrett couldn't quite read. Memory and grief and love all tangled together. He died when I was 17. Heart attack. No warning. One day he was teaching me how to change oil. The next day, he was gone. I'm sorry. He would have liked you. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. He always said the same thing you just said, that most mechanics wanted quick fixes because quick fixes paid better, but the real craftsmen were the ones who did it right, even when it took longer. Garrett felt the connection form between them, invisible but real, two people who'd lost too much too soon, and were still trying to live up to impossible standards set by people who'd never be there to see them succeed. Is that why you drive a Maserati? Victoria looked at him, something shifting in her face. My father used to have a picture on his wall in his shop. A red Maserati from the 60s. Some Italian race car that had won at Monza or Le Mans. I don't remember which. He'd never seen one in person, never even sat in one, but he thought it was the most beautiful car ever made. She touched the Maserati's fender gently, almost reverently. He used to joke that when he made his first million, he'd buy one and park it right in the middle of his shop just to prove it could be done. He never made his first million. No, he never did. Victoria's jaw tightened. When I made my first billion, I bought this car. I thought somehow he would know, somewhere he would be proud that his daughter had done what he never got to do. Garrett understood then, understood it all. The fury when mechanics condescended to her, the desperation when 50 experts failed, the importance of this particular car that was never just about transportation or status. The Maserati was her connection to a father she'd lost, a way of honoring a dream he never got to fulfill, just like this shop was Garrett's connection to Wyatt. His way of keeping a legacy alive that everyone else seemed ready to forget. Just like Rachel's wedding ring on the chain around his neck was his way of remembering that love didn't end just because breathing did. I'm going to fix your car, Victoria. She looked at him, searching his face for doubt or bravado or false confidence. You sound very sure. I am. Because this isn't just a job anymore. It's personal. Victoria held his gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them that Garrett couldn't name but could feel. An understanding that went beyond mechanic and client, beyond class and circumstance, down to the core truth that some debts were owed to the dead and some promises had to be kept no matter the cost. 6 o'clock tomorrow? She asked. 6 o'clock. She turned to leave, then stopped. Garrett. Yeah? Thank you for telling me to shut up yesterday. I needed to hear it. She walked to the Mercedes before he could respond, and Garrett stood alone in the cooling evening air, watching her taillights disappear into Chicago traffic, feeling the weight of what? The Maserati dealership sat on the north end of Chicago, all glass and chrome, and the kind of architectural arrogance that said money talks, and yours isn't saying much. Garrett pulled his battered F-150 into the employee lot at 10:45 p.m., killed the engine, sat in the darkness, watching the service bay lights glow through tinted windows. His palms were sweating. Not from fear exactly, more from the accumulated weight of everything riding on the next 6 hours. The shop, Lily's future, Callum's job, Victoria's last shred of hope, Wyatt's legacy. All of it balanced on borrowed equipment and a theory that might be completely wrong. Callum emerged from the side entrance at 10:58, right on schedule, wearing his tech uniform and the expression of a man who'd made peace with a bad decision. He didn't speak, just handed Garrett a black laptop bag and a key card for the gate, kept his eyes on the ground like he couldn't quite bring himself to acknowledge what they were doing. 6 hours, Callum said quietly. Back by 5 a.m. sharp. The morning manager shows up at 5:30. I'll be here at 4:45. The software's already loaded. License is active until dawn. After that, it locks itself and sends a report to corporate about which terminal was used. Callum finally met Garrett's eyes. Don't make me regret this. I won't. Garrett gripped his friend's shoulder. I promise, Cal. This is going to work. It better. Callum glanced back at the dealership, at the cameras he'd carefully mapped out, the blind spots he'd identified, the risk assessment he'd done in his head 100 times since yesterday's call. Sarah's been asking questions. Wants to know why I'm so tense. I told her work stuff. After this is done, bring her and the kids by the shop. Dinner on me. Whatever she wants. If this works, I'm holding you to that. If it doesn't, I'm holding you to covering my unemployment. Callum disappeared back into the dealership. Garrett sat in his truck for another minute, the laptop bag heavy on the passenger seat, heavier than its actual weight, dense with obligation and hope and the particular terror that came from knowing you'd asked someone else to risk something precious because your own need was greater than your pride. He drove back to Rivers Automotive through empty streets, the city quiet in that specific way of late weeknight Chicago, when the bars had closed and the early commuters hadn't yet stirred. The shop looked small in the darkness, humble, the peeling paint and cracked foundation visible even in the dim streetlight glow. This building had been Wyatt's cathedral, his monument, the physical manifestation of 30 years spent turning wrenches and building trust and proving that a man could make something that mattered with nothing but skill and integrity. Garrett had spent 8 months trying to fill that space, trying to be worthy of the name over the door, failing a little more each week as the clients drifted away and the bills piled up, and the weight of inheritance crushed him. Not tonight. Tonight he was going to do something impossible. And tomorrow Victoria Sterling would know that some mechanics still understood what it meant to care more about getting it right than getting paid. The Maserati waited in Bay 2, pearl white under the fluorescent work lights, beautiful and broken in equal measure. Garrett connected the laptop to the diagnostic port, watched the screen fill with code and menus and options that most backyard mechanics would never see, the deep programming that controlled every function of a modern luxury vehicle. The interface was clean, professional, intimidating, designed for factory-trained technicians who'd spent weeks in certification courses learning the proper protocols. Garrett had spent 20 minutes on YouTube watching tutorial videos and reading forum posts from anonymous internet strangers who may or may not have actually known what they were talking about. He started with the error codes, pulling every fault stored in the computer's memory. The screen populated slowly, line after line of red text, warnings and failures and diagnostics that painted a picture of an engine control unit losing its mind in slow motion. 217 stored errors. Some were current, most were historical, problems that had been recorded and supposedly fixed, but never truly cleared. Ghosts haunting the system like unresolved trauma. Each error represented a layer of confusion, a symptom that some mechanic had chased, a part that had been replaced, a compensation the computer had learned. 50 mechanics, 217 mistakes, all stacked on top of each other until the foundation crumbled under the accumulated weight of good intentions and expensive failures. Garrett cleared them all, watched the red text disappear, the screen go blank, felt something like satisfaction mixed with terror. Step 1 complete. Next came the adaptive memory tables, the learned behaviors, the fuel trim adjustments, the throttle response curves, the turbo boost maps. All the tiny calibrations the computer had made over thousands of miles trying to keep the engine running despite problems that kept shifting and changing as mechanics swapped parts and introduced new variables. This was the corruption Wyatt had taught him to recognize, the difference between mechanical failure and systemic confusion, the reason a perfectly good engine could run like garbage if the computer's assumptions were fundamentally wrong. He wiped everything, factory reset, tabula rasa, an infant brain waiting to be taught how the world actually worked instead of clinging to patterns learned in dysfunction. It was 3:17 a.m. when he finished the software work. His eyes burned from staring at code. His back ached from hunching over the laptop. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but the screen showed green status across every system. No errors, no warnings. Just clean factory programming waiting for real-world data. Now came the hard part. Garrett started the Maserati. The engine roared to life with that particular Italian aggression that made even a cold start sound like a threat, smooth and powerful but uncertain, a thoroughbred that had forgotten how to run properly and was waiting for someone to teach it again. Without its learned behaviors, the engine was operating purely on base programming, good enough to move, good enough to function, but not optimized, not calibrated, not aware of its own capabilities. The learning cycle protocol was specific, detailed, unforgiving. 5 minutes of idle warm-up. 10 minutes of gentle driving under 30 miles per hour, letting the computer sample basic operating conditions. Gradual acceleration up to 50, smooth and steady. No sudden throttle inputs. Maintain speed for 15 minutes on highway, teaching the system what normal cruising looked like. Gentle decelerations, controlled braking, no aggressive maneuvers. 50 miles total, every mile deliberate, every input measured, showing the computer how to behave when everything was working correctly. Garrett pulled out of the shop at 3:45 a.m. and drove into the sleeping city. Lakeshore Drive was empty, the skyline dark except for scattered office lights and the red beacons on top of Willis Tower. He kept the Maserati at exactly 32 miles per hour, feeling the engine respond, sensing the computer taking notes on fuel mixture and air temperature and throttle position. The car purred beneath him, uncertain but willing, like an athlete recovering from injury who'd forgotten how good it felt to move without pain. Past Navy Pier, the Ferris wheel, dark and still against the lake. Under the overpass where the red line rumbled overhead every 7 minutes during rush hour but sat silent now. Through Streeterville, where the wealthy slept in condos that cost more than Garrett would earn in 10 lifetimes. The Maserati ran smoother with each mile, the hesitation fading, the power delivery evening out as the computer absorbed data and built new maps based on actual performance instead of corrupted memories. At 4:05, he merged onto I-90, accelerated smoothly to 55, set the cruise control. The engine settled into a rhythm, the twin turbos spooling and releasing with mechanical precision, every component talking to every other component in the conversation Wyatt had taught him to hear. This was what right sounded like, what proper felt like, the difference between a machine fighting itself and a machine working in harmony. Garrett drove west toward the suburbs, watching the odometer count miles, checking the laptop periodically to see the adaptive tables filling with clean data. 40 miles, 45, 50. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, that pre-dawn gray that meant morning was coming whether you were ready or not. He returned to Rivers Automotive at 4:43 a.m., pulled the Maserati back into Bay 2, shut it down. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, a sound like satisfaction. Garrett connected the laptop one final time, Checked the diagnostics, saw nothing but green status indicators and healthy operating parameters. Every reading was in spec. Every system was functioning within manufacturer tolerances. The Maserati was fixed. He packed up the laptop, drove back to the dealership with 17 minutes to spare. Found Callum waiting by the employee entrance, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. "Tell me it worked," Callum said, taking the laptop bag. "It worked. You're sure? Because if this thing comes back with the same problems, it won't." Garrett was surprised by his own certainty. "It's done, Cal. The car is running exactly how it's supposed to run." Callum exhaled slowly, relief and lingering anxiety fighting for control of his expression. "Sarah's going to kill me when she finds out what I did. Don't tell her. Tell her you helped an old friend. Tell her you did something good. I helped an old friend do something illegal. You helped me save my shop. There's a difference." Garrett clasped his hand. "Thank you, brother. I mean it. I couldn't have done this without you. You better not screw it up from here." Callum managed a tired smile. "And you owe me that dinner. Somewhere expensive. Somewhere Sarah gets to dress up and feel fancy. Done." Garrett drove home as the sun broke over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the city waking up around him. He made it back to the shop at 5:30, climbed the stairs to the apartment, found Lily already awake and eating cereal at the small kitchen table. "Did you fix it?" she asked around a mouthful of Cheerios. "I think so. We'll know for sure later today. When the car lady comes at 6? When the car lady comes at 6. Lily studied him with those two perceptive eyes. "You look happy. Different happy than you've been." Garrett realized she was right. For the first time in 8 months, he felt like himself, like someone who belonged in his father's shop, not because of inheritance, but because of capability, like a mechanic who could solve problems that defeated others. "I feel good about this one, sweetheart. I feel like maybe we're going to be okay." "We were always going to be okay, Daddy. I told you." Grandpa's watching. Mom too. Garrett slept for 3 hours, dreamless and deep, the kind of sleep that came from exhaustion mixed with accomplishment. When he woke at noon, his phone showed 2 missed calls from Victoria and a text message. "Need to see you before 6. Can you come to my office at 2? He texted back, "I'll be there." Sterling Capital occupied the 43rd floor of a glass tower in the Loop, the kind of building where the elevators moved fast enough to make your ears pop, and the lobby security looked at his work boots and flannel shirt like he'd wandered in from a different city entirely. Garrett gave his name to the receptionist, endured her skeptical once-over, sat in a waiting area with furniture that probably cost more than his truck. Victoria appeared at 2:07, still in business mode but less armored than their first meeting. Navy suit instead of Chanel, sensible heels instead of Louboutins, hair in a professional bun that looked efficient rather than intimidating. She led him past cubicles where young analysts stared at Bloomberg terminals and traded in millions like Garrett traded in oil filters, into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. Her desk was mahogany, antique, immaculate. The walls held framed degrees from Stanford and Columbia, awards from business journals, photographs of Victoria shaking hands with people Garrett vaguely recognized from CNN. But what caught his attention was the small photo in a simple wooden frame on the corner of her desk. A younger Victoria, maybe 17, standing next to a grease-stained man in coveralls, both of them smiling in front of a small garage with a hand-painted sign that read, "Sterling Auto Repair." "That's him," Victoria said quietly, following his gaze. "That's my father. Taken 3 weeks before he died." He looks proud of you." He was, even when I chose law school over working in the shop with him. He said someone in the family should wear a suit that wasn't covered in oil. Victoria gestured for Garrett to sit, took her own chair behind the desk. "I didn't bring you here to reminisce. I wanted to talk before tonight's check-in." "Is something wrong? My board is concerned about me." "There's been talk, the last few weeks, missing meetings, taking calls during presentations, leaving early." She leaned back, and Garrett saw the exhaustion in her face, the weight she carried that had nothing to do with the Maserati. "They think I'm distracted. Are you?" Victoria smiled, small and genuine. "Yes, I'm distracted by the fact that 50 mechanics failed to solve a problem that a 34-year-old shop owner in a failing garage might actually fix. I'm distracted by the possibility that someone finally listened to what I was saying instead of what they assumed I must be confused about." She paused, and her expression shifted into something more vulnerable. "I'm distracted by the fact that for the first time in 15 years, I met someone who told me to shut up and meant it, and instead of destroying him, I respected him for it." Garrett didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just let the words hang in the air between them. "My brother came to see me this morning," Victoria continued. "Nolan. He's 2 years older, vice president of acquisitions, thinks he should be running this company because he has the right chromosomes." She said it without bitterness, just stating facts. "He's heard that I've been visiting a mechanic's shop on the south side. He's concerned about appearances." "What did you tell him?" "That my car needed fixing, and I found someone competent." She leaned forward, elbows on the desk, hands clasped. "He didn't believe me. He thinks there's something else happening, some midlife crisis or nervous breakdown or inappropriate relationship." "Is there?" Garrett heard himself ask it before he could stop himself. Victoria held his gaze. "I don't know yet. What I do know is that I spent this morning in a board meeting talking about quarterly projections and market diversification and leveraged buyouts, and all I could think about was whether you managed to reset the adaptive learning tables without corrupting the base programming. That sounds like a distraction. It sounds like the first time I've cared about something real in longer than I can remember." Victoria stood, walked to the window, looked down at the river 43 floors below. This company was my father's dream. He wanted me to build something that would last, something that mattered. So I did. $2 billion, 1,600 employees, offices in 7 countries. I built exactly what he asked for. But he died doing what he loved, Garrett, working in that garage with oil on his hands and a smile on his face because he'd just figured out why a customer's Buick was making a weird noise. He died happy, and I'm standing in a corner office feeling nothing. Maybe you built what you thought he wanted instead of what would make you happy." Victoria turned from the window. "And what would make me happy?" "I don't know. But I know you came to my shop every day this week when you could have just called for updates. I know you stayed and talked about things that had nothing to do with your car. I know my daughter said you were crying looking at my father's picture." Victoria's face shifted, surprise and something like shame. She saw that. Children see everything adults try to hide. I wasn't crying. Victoria's voice was defensive. I was remembering what it felt like when my father was proud of me. Before I became this. You can still be that person. Can I? Because from where I'm standing, I'm 42 years old. I run a company I'm not sure I even like anymore. I'm about to lose a $300 million deal in Dubai because I can't focus. And the only thing that's made sense to me in the last month is watching a mechanic care more about doing something right than getting paid for it. Is that so bad? My board thinks so. My brother thinks so. The shareholders would definitely think so if they knew. What do you think? Victoria sat back down, and for a moment she looked smaller, younger, less like a billionaire, and more like a person trying to figure out who she was supposed to be. I think I spent 17 years trying to honor my father by being successful, and I forgot to honor him by being happy. I think I built a company that would impress him, but I became someone he might not recognize. Garrett leaned forward. My dad died 8 months ago. Heart attack, right in the shop. Exactly where he would have chosen if he'd gotten to choose. And every day since, I've been terrified that I'm not good enough to keep his legacy alive, that I'm going to fail and prove everyone right who said I was too young, too inexperienced, too much of a disappointment. But last night, driving your car through the city at 4 a.m., teaching a computer how to breathe again, that's the first time since he died that I felt like myself. Not his son trying to fill his shoes, just myself doing what I'm good at, doing it right because right matters. Victoria smiled, and it was real, warm, the kind of smile that changed her whole face. You fixed it, didn't you? The car. You actually fixed it. I think so, but you'll have to drive it to be sure. When? Now if you want. I can leave work. For once, I can actually leave work. They took the elevator down together, stepped out into afternoon sun and the controlled chaos of downtown Chicago at rush hour. Victoria's driver was waiting with the Mercedes, but she waved him off, told him to take the rest of the day. She and Garrett walked to the parking garage where her Audi Q7 sat in a reserved spot, and she drove them south toward the industrial district, toward the shop where a pearl-white Maserati waited to prove whether 51 was a charm or just another failure in a long line of expensive mistakes. Lily was sitting on the shop steps when they arrived, doing homework with the particular concentration of a child who wanted to eavesdrop, but didn't want to be caught at it. She looked up as Victoria parked, gave a small wave that Victoria returned. She's sweet, Victoria said. She thinks you need a friend. Smart kid. I do need a friend. They walked into the shop together. The Maserati sat exactly where Garrett had left it, looking innocent, giving no hint of the 6-hour ordeal it had been through. He handed Victoria the keys, watched her face cycle through hope and fear and determination. "What am I looking for?" she asked. "Nothing. Just drive it. If the problem's still there, you'll know. And if it's not, then 51 was the charm." Victoria started the engine. It caught immediately, settled into that perfect Italian idle that sounded like controlled violence. She sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, listening, feeling, waiting for the familiar hesitation that had plagued this car for 2 months. It didn't come. "Get in," she said. "I want you there when I find out." Garrett climbed into the passenger seat, felt the leather embrace him, breathed the scent of luxury that would never be part of his world except in borrowed moments like this. Victoria pulled out of the shop, merged onto the street, drove slowly at first, testing, cautious as someone who'd been burned too many times to trust easily. Nothing happened. The car responded smoothly. Power delivery instant and linear. No stuttering, no hesitation, no loss of boost that had made every other mechanic scratch their heads and throw parts at symptoms they couldn't understand. Victoria accelerated harder, pushed it up to 45 in a 35 zone, felt the turbos spool and deliver their fury with mechanical precision. "It's never done this," she whispered. "Not once since the problem started. It always hesitated at high throttle. Keep driving." She did, For 30 minutes, she pushed the Maserati through every test she could think of: hard acceleration from stops, highway merges, steep hills, sudden braking, everything that had triggered the problem before. The car performed flawlessly, responding like it had just rolled off the factory floor, like it had never been broken, like the last 2 months had been a bad dream that had finally released its grip. When they pulled back into the shop, Victoria was crying, not the angry tears of frustration she'd hidden for months, but different tears, relief and joy and gratitude all mixed together. She turned off the engine, sat in silence for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel. "You did it," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You actually did it. We did it. You told me the truth about what was happening. That's what made the difference. 50 mechanics, and you're the only one who listened. 50 mechanics wanted to fix your car. I wanted to understand it. There's a difference." Victoria turned to look at him, and Garrett saw something shift in her expression, some barrier falling away, some decision being made. "How much do I owe you?" Garrett did the math quickly. 20 hours of work at $75 per hour for European luxury vehicles. $1,500. Victoria laughed, and it was genuine, full, unguarded. "You're joking. That's my rate. Your rate is robbery in your favor." She pulled out her checkbook from the glove compartment, wrote something, tore it out, handed it to him. "I spent $400,000 on 50 mechanics who did nothing. You spent 2 days and actually fixed it. This is what that's worth." Garrett looked at the check. $100,000. "Victoria, I can't accept this. You can, and you will." Her voice was firm, the executive returning, but gentler now, softer around the edges. "This isn't charity, Garrett. This is what your work is worth. Not because of the hours, because of the result, because of the integrity, because you told me to shut up when I needed to hear it, and then you proved you had the skill to back up that confidence. It's too much. It's not enough." Victoria reached out, closed his fingers around the check. "Take it. Pay your rent. Buy your daughter something nice. Keep your father's shop alive. And know that you earned every penny." Garrett stared at the check, at numbers that represented more money than he'd made in the last 3 months combined, enough to catch up every bill, enough to buy breathing room, enough to prove that skill and honesty still mattered in a world that seemed to value credentials over capability. "There's something else," Victoria said. "I want you to be my exclusive mechanic. Every service, every repair, only you, Victoria, and I'm going to recommend you to everyone I know." She leaned back in the driver's seat, and for the first time since Garrett had met her, she looked relaxed, at peace. "You're going to be very busy very soon, Garrett Rivers. I hope you're ready." Garrett thought about Wyatt, about the legacy his father had built, about the name over the door that meant something to the people who understood what real craftsmanship looked like. "I'm ready. Good. Because this is just the beginning." They sat in the Maserati as the afternoon sun painted long shadows across the shop floor. Two people from different worlds who'd found common ground in the language of broken things made whole. In the recognition that some debts were paid in trust, and some victories were measured in proving that the old ways still worked if you had the patience to do them right. Lily appeared in the doorway, backpack on her shoulder, homework finished. "Daddy, it's almost 6. Mrs. Brennan said I should remind you about dinner." Victoria smiled. "You should go. Your daughter's waiting. What about you? I'm going to sit here for a minute. It's been 2 months since I could just sit in this car without it feeling like a problem waiting to happen." I want to enjoy that. Garrett stepped out, closed the door gently. Through the windshield, he could see Victoria running her hands over the steering wheel, her eyes closed, a small smile on her face. She looked younger, lighter, like someone who'd been carrying weight for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. "Is the car lady staying for dinner?" Lily asked. "Not tonight, sweetheart, but she's happy now. I can tell." "Yeah, baby, I think she is. And we're going to be okay now, right? Because of the check, we're going to be okay." Lily slipped her hand into his. "I told you Grandpa was watching. And Mom. They both are." They walked upstairs together, leaving Victoria alone with her Maserati, and whatever thoughts came with finally finding someone who understood that the most valuable things couldn't be bought, only earned through the kind of patient competence that had become rare enough to be revolutionary. The check cleared on Monday morning. Garrett watched his bank balance transform from 4 digits that started with 8 to 6 digits that started with 1, felt the particular vertigo that came from financial security appearing overnight after months of drowning. He paid the rent first, $12,500 that bought him another month in the building where his father had built a reputation, one honest repair at a time. Then utilities, insurance, the equipment loan that had hung over him like a guillotine. By noon, he'd cleared every past due notice, bought himself breathing room, proven that Lily's faith in him wasn't misplaced. By Tuesday afternoon, the phone started ringing. First call came from Marcus Whitfield, senior partner at Victoria's law firm, driving a Mercedes S-Class with electrical gremlins that 3 dealerships had blamed on everything from bad batteries to possessed wiring harnesses. "Victoria gave him your name, said you were the only mechanic in Chicago worth trusting." His voice carried the particular skepticism of wealthy men confronting blue-collar expertise. "Can you actually fix this, or are you another charlatan with a good sales pitch?" "Bring it by tomorrow morning," Garrett said. "If I can't fix it, you don't pay. Simple as that." Whitfield arrived at 8 a.m. Wednesday in a black S-Class that looked showroom perfect, but behaved like it had been cursed by an angry electrician. Random warning lights, windows that rolled down on their own, climate control that switched between Arctic and tropical without input. Garrett spent 40 minutes with a multimeter and a wiring diagram before finding the problem, a single corroded ground point behind the passenger kick panel, creating voltage fluctuations that confused every module in the electrical network. $200 in labor, problem solved. Whitfield drove away, shaking his head in disbelief that something so simple had defeated Mercedes-Benz specialists charging $200 per hour. Thursday brought Judge Patricia Brennan, no relation to his neighbor Mrs. Brennan, with a Porsche Cayenne that consumed oil like an alcoholic consumed whiskey, burning through a quart every 500 miles. 2 dealerships had declared it normal operating parameters, told her high-performance engines just did that, offered to sell her oil by the case. Garrett found the PCV system completely clogged, creating crankcase pressure that forced oil past the rings and into the combustion chambers. 4 hours of work, $300 in parts. Problem disappeared. The judge left him her business card and a promise that every lawyer in her courthouse would hear about the mechanic who still believed in actually fixing things. Friday afternoon, a tech CEO named David Morrison showed up in a Ferrari 488 that made strange harmonic noises at high RPM, a sound like the engine was crying or singing or begging for mercy, depending on your interpretation. 7 shops had driven it, shrugged, suggested he learn to live with it because Italian cars had character. Garrett found a heat shield that had come loose and was resonating against the exhaust at specific frequencies. Zip-tied it properly, charged $200, earned a customer who owned 14 vehicles and had just decided where all of them were going for maintenance from now on. By the following Wednesday, Rivers Automotive had more work scheduled than Garrett could handle alone. He called Derek Munson, a technician who'd been laid off from European imports when business dried up, offered him 40 hours a week at $25 per hour. Derek showed up Thursday morning with his own tools and a grateful handshake, slid under a Bentley Continental with a mysterious coolant leak like he'd been working there for years. Victoria kept her promise about visiting. She appeared every evening around 5, sometimes in the Audi, sometimes in the Maserati, once in a vintage Jaguar E-Type she'd inherited from an uncle and never quite trusted to run properly. She'd changed since the repair, softened in ways Garrett noticed but couldn't quite articulate, arrived in jeans more often than suits, pulled her hair back in simple ponytails instead of corporate severity, laughed more easily at Lily's observations about the world. They talked while Garrett worked, conversations that started about cars and drifted into territory that had nothing to do with mechanical problems. Victoria described board meetings where grown executives argued about quarterly projections like they were debating philosophy, the pressure of managing other people's money, the loneliness of being surrounded by employees who saw her as a title rather than a person. Garrett shared the weight of inheritance, the impossibility of living up to legends, the fear that every decision he made was slowly dismantling what Wyatt had spent 3 decades building. "Your father would be proud," Victoria said one evening, watching Garrett diagnose a misfire on a Range Rover that had stumped 2 dealerships. "Look at this place. You've got work scheduled 3 weeks out. You hired help. You're solving problems nobody else can solve." That's exactly what he did. He made it look easier because you only saw the result, not the struggle. Victoria leaned against the workbench, and Garrett was struck again by how comfortable she'd become in his shop. How natural she looked, surrounded by tools and the controlled chaos of a working garage. "My father used to come home exhausted, covered in oil, frustrated because some repair hadn't gone the way he planned. I thought he was unhappy. It took me years to realize that was just what hard work looked like. Do you miss it? The shop, I mean, working with your hands, every day." Victoria's voice was quiet, almost wistful. "I remember the summer I was 16. He taught me how to rebuild a carburetor. Took us 3 days because he insisted I understand every component, every adjustment, the reason behind every specification. When we finally got it back together and the engine started on the first try, he bought me ice cream and told me I had mechanic's hands. What happened? Life happened. College, law school. The assumption that working in a garage wasn't what successful people did. She smiled, but it was sad around the edges. My father never pushed me either direction. Just said whatever I chose, do it with integrity. So I became a lawyer, then an investor, then a CEO. Built a company worth billions. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what my hands were for. They're for whatever you want them to be for. Are they? Because right now they're for signing contracts and shaking hands with people I don't particularly like and holding champagne glasses at charity events where everyone congratulates each other for being wealthy. Sounds exhausting. It is." Victoria pushed off the workbench, wandered over to where Lily sat doing homework in the corner office. "Your daughter asked me something yesterday. Want to know what it was? Should I be worried? She asked if I was happy." Just point blank, no context. Looked up from her math homework and asked if I was happy. "What did you say?" I told her I didn't know. And she said that was sad, because everyone should know if they're happy or not. Garrett laughed despite himself. 8 years old and she's already a philosopher. She's remarkable. Victoria glanced at Lily through the office window, and something in her expression shifted, softened into something almost maternal. You're raising her right, Garrett, making her feel safe enough to be wise. Trying to. Some days I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. None of us do. We just do the best we can and hope it's enough. The moment felt weighted, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with proximity and everything to do with two people recognizing something in each other that they'd been missing elsewhere. Garrett was trying to figure out what to say when his phone rang, Callum's name on the screen. "Hey, Cal, what's up?" Callum's voice was tight, stressed in a way that made Garrett's stomach drop. "We have a problem. Big one. Can you talk?" Garrett stepped outside into the September evening, cool air carrying the smell of the city, exhaust and fried food, and the particular metallic tang of industry. What kind of problem? The kind where the dealership inventory manager is asking questions about the diagnostic laptop. Someone noticed the usage logs showed activity at 3 a.m. 2 weeks ago, which doesn't match any scheduled service appointments or logged repairs. Did they trace it to you? Not yet, but they're investigating. Called a meeting for tomorrow morning. Want every night shift tech to explain their movements, account for equipment usage. Callum exhaled shakily. Sarah knows now. I had to tell her. She's furious, Garrett. Says I risked our family for your gamble. I'm sorry. God, Cal, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't help if I lose my job. We've got a mortgage, 2 kids in private school, Sarah's student loans from nursing school. I can't afford to be unemployed. What do you need me to do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. Just, if this goes bad, if they fire me, I'm going to need that dinner to be a job offer instead. Done. Whatever you need, I mean it. I know you do. Callum paused. The car's fixed, right? Victoria's Maserati. It actually worked? It worked. She's been driving it for 2 weeks without a single problem. Then, maybe it was worth it. Maybe. The line went dead. Garrett stood in the cooling evening, feeling the weight of consequences settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. He'd asked Callum to risk everything, promised it would work out, delivered on the fix, but couldn't control what came after. That was the problem with asking people to believe in you. Their faith became your responsibility. Their losses became your debt. Victoria emerged from the shop, read his face immediately. Bad news. Friend who helped me fix your car is in trouble. The dealership knows someone used their equipment off the clock. They're investigating. Will he lose his job? Maybe. Probably. Garrett ran a hand through his hair, frustration and guilt mixing into something acidic. He did it because I asked him to, because I convinced him it was important. Was it important? Of course it was. But that doesn't make it right to drag someone else down with me. Victoria was quiet for a moment, thinking in that particular way she had where you could almost see the legal training working through scenarios and outcomes. How much would a diagnostic laptop like that cost? $5,000 for the software license. The hardware is another $2,000. And if someone were to donate that equipment to your shop, would you still need to borrow from dealerships? I couldn't accept that. Why not? You fixed my car. I told you I was going to recommend you to people. Do you have any idea how many luxury vehicles my associates drive? How much diagnostic equipment you'll need to service them properly? That's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Victoria pulled out her phone, typed something quickly. I'm sending you a purchase order for diagnostic equipment. Consider it an investment in our ongoing business relationship. Victoria, Garrett. Her voice was firm, the executive returning. Your friend risked his job to help you help me. The least I can do is make sure you never have to put someone in that position again. Besides, this is good business. I need you equipped properly if you're going to be my exclusive mechanic. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, tension flowing back into her shoulders. Speaking of business, my brother wants to meet tomorrow. Says it's urgent. Nolan, the one and only. She said it with the particular weariness of someone who'd fought the same battle too many times. I'm sure it's nothing good. What does he want? Usually, my resignation, my board seat, my company, my dignity. He's not picky. Victoria managed a smile, but it was brittle. Tomorrow I'll find out which one he's demanding this time. She left shortly after, the Maserati's taillights disappearing into evening traffic, and Garrett was left alone with the growing realization that fixing Victoria's car had been the simple part. The complications were just beginning. Thursday morning brought Nolan Sterling. Garrett was under a Lamborghini Huracan, dealing with an exhaust leak that the owner swore was going to burn his garage down when he heard the BMW M8 pull up outside. The engine note was aggressive, expensive, the automotive equivalent of someone who'd never been told no. He slid out from under the Lamborghini to find a man in a $5,000 suit standing in his shop like he'd just discovered a health code violation. Nolan Sterling was 44, but looked younger, the kind of preserved youth that came from personal trainers and good genes, and never having worried about money long enough for the stress to leave marks. His hair was perfect, his Rolex was gold, his expression was the particular contempt that wealthy men reserved for people they considered beneath them. You're the mechanic. Not a question, more like an accusation. Garrett Rivers. He didn't offer his hand, could already tell it wouldn't be accepted. Can I help you? I'm Nolan Sterling, Victoria's brother. Nolan looked around the shop with visible distaste, taking in the cracked concrete floor, the aging equipment, the general aesthetic of function over form. I wanted to see for myself what has my sister so distracted. She had a car problem. I fixed it. That's what mechanics do. Right. The car problem. Nolan smiled, and it was all teeth, no warmth. Funny how 50 qualified mechanics at reputable establishments couldn't solve it, but you managed in 2 days. Almost makes a person suspicious. I got lucky. Or you manufactured a problem so you could solve it. Create dependency, establish yourself as indispensable, start charging premium rates for routine service. It's a classic con. Garrett felt anger flash through him, hot and immediate, but Wyatt's voice in his head told him to stay calm, stay professional, never let them see you lose control. Your sister brought me a car with corrupted adaptive learning tables. I wiped the system and performed a proper retraining cycle. The diagnostic records are available if you want to review them. I'm sure they are. Very thorough, very professional, completely meaningless to someone who isn't a mechanic. Nolan stepped closer, and Garrett could smell expensive cologne and entitlement. Let me tell you what I see. I see a struggling shop owner who got very lucky when a wealthy client walked through his door. I see someone smart enough to solve her problem and savvy enough to parlay that into ongoing business. That's a cynical way of looking at honest work. Honest work? Nolan laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Victoria has been coming here every day for 3 weeks. Every day, Garrett. She's missing board meetings, taking calls during presentations, leaving the office early. Her assistant says she talks about you constantly. The mechanic who actually listens. The one who understands. The man who tells her the truth. Sounds like she values competence. It sounds like she's developing an attachment that's going to compromise her judgment and hurt the company. Nolan's expression hardened. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop seeing my sister. No more daily visits, no more conversations, no more whatever this little friendship is that you've cultivated. And if I don't, then I will destroy you. Nolan said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. I have lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear. I have connections at the city licensing board who can find violations in any shop if they look hard enough. I have private investigators who can dig through your past until they find something embarrassing. He leaned in, close enough that Garrett could see his own reflection in Nolan's aviator sunglasses. I can have your business licenses revoked, your certifications pulled for review, your insurance canceled, your bank account frozen pending fraud investigation. I can make it so no supplier in this city will sell you parts. No customer will trust you. No employee will work for you. Garrett kept his voice level, calm, even though every muscle in his body wanted to grab this man by his perfect suit and throw him into the street. You're threatening me because your sister found someone who treats her like a person instead of a profit center. I'm protecting her from making a mistake. You're a distraction, Garrett, a phase. She'll realize that eventually, probably when you fail to fix something expensive, and she remembers why she used to work with qualified professionals. But in the meantime, you're a liability. Get out. Excuse me. I said, get out of my shop. Garrett stepped forward and Nolan stepped back. Some primal instinct recognizing the difference between boardroom aggression and the kind of strength that came from 34 years of working with his hands. You can threaten me all you want. You can call your lawyers and your investigators and your licensing board friends. But you're going to do it from somewhere else. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Now leave. Nolan's jaw tightened. Hands curling into fists that had probably never hit anything harder than a golf ball. This isn't over. It is for today. Nolan stalked to his BMW, peeled out of the parking area with enough aggression to leave rubber on the asphalt, disappeared into traffic like a threat driving itself home. Garrett stood in the doorway, heart pounding, anger and fear mixing into something that tasted like copper. Derek emerged from the back office where he'd clearly heard everything. That was Victoria Sterling's brother? Yeah. He seems nice. Real charmer. Garrett tried to laugh. Couldn't quite manage it. How much of that did you hear? Enough to know you should take his threats seriously. Guys like that don't bluff. I know. You going to tell Victoria? Have to. She should know what her brother's doing. Derek was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. Boss, I'm going to say something, and I need you to not take it the wrong way. Go ahead. You've got a good thing building here. Real good. Work is coming in. Money's flowing. Reputation's growing. Don't let a relationship with a client, even a rich one, mess that up. We're not in a relationship. Not yet, maybe. But I've seen how she looks at you. And I've seen how you look at her when you think nobody's watching. Derek shrugged. Just saying, mixing business and personal is how good shops end up in bankruptcy court. Noted. But Derek was right, and Garrett knew it. Somewhere in the last 3 weeks, Victoria had stopped being just a client and become something else. Friend, confidant. The person whose opinion mattered more than it should, whose smile changed the temperature in the room. That was dangerous territory for a mechanic who just started crawling out of financial disaster, who couldn't afford complications, who had a daughter depending on him to make smart choices. But the heart didn't care about smart choices. It just wanted what it wanted. Victoria showed up at 5:30, earlier than usual, driving the Audi with the kind of controlled aggression that meant something had gone wrong. She parked too fast, got out too quickly, her expression cycling through anger and hurt and determination. "Nolan came to see you. Not a question. This morning. How did you know?" "Because he just came from a board meeting where he suggested I be removed as CEO for neglecting my fiduciary duties and allowing personal relationships to compromise my judgment." Victoria leaned against her car, and Garrett saw the exhaustion in every line of her body. He filed a formal motion. 3 other board members co-signed it. Can he do that? He can try. I own 40% of the company, but the other board members control 60. If they unite against me, they can force me out. What grounds is he claiming? Erratic behavior, missed meetings, distracted leadership. He cited the last 3 weeks specifically. How I've been leaving early, taking more time off, delegating responsibilities I used to handle personally. She looked at Garrett, and her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying, wasn't giving Nolan the satisfaction. "He's using you as evidence that I'm losing focus. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. You didn't do anything wrong." Victoria pushed off the car, started pacing, energy building like pressure in a sealed system. This is what Nolan does. He finds leverage, and he uses it. He's been waiting for me to show weakness for years, and now he thinks he has it. What are you going to do? Fight. The word was sharp, certain, carrying the weight of 15 years building a company from nothing. I built sterling capital with my own money, my own deals, my own reputation. I turned $200,000 from my father's life insurance into $2 billion. I've made every investor who trusted me wealthy beyond their expectations. She stopped pacing, faced Garrett directly. And yes, I've been distracted lately. Yes, I've been leaving work early and missing meetings and spending time in a garage talking to a mechanic about things that have nothing to do with quarterly earnings. But you know what? What? For the first time in 15 years, I've been happy. Not successful, not productive, not accomplished, happy. And if my board thinks that's a fireable offense, then maybe I'm running the wrong company. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that went beyond business and touched something personal, something Garrett wasn't sure either of them was ready to acknowledge. Before he could respond, Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at it, her expression shifting from determination to concern. "It's Eleanor Hayes, my lawyer." I asked her to review Nolan's motion. Victoria answered, listened, went pale. "When?" Her voice was barely controlled. "How many board members?" I see. Call an emergency session for Monday. I'm not letting this happen without a fight." She ended the call, looked at Garrett with eyes that had gone from wet to hard, from hurt to furious. "The board is meeting tomorrow morning without me." Emergency session. Nolan convinced them I'm a liability, that the company needs new leadership before the Dubai deal falls apart. Tomorrow's Friday. I know. He's forcing it before the weekend, before I have time to prepare, before I can rally support. She laughed, but it was bitter, sharp. My own brother is executing a coup. What can I do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. This is my fight. Then let me fight it with you. Garrett, you don't understand. If Nolan wins tomorrow, if the board votes to remove me, I lose everything. The company, my reputation, my authority. And everyone will say it's because I let a mechanic distract me from what mattered. Were you distracted? Yes, but not in the way they think. Victoria stepped closer, and Garrett could see the storm in her eyes, anger and fear and something else he couldn't name. I wasn't distracted from my work. I was distracted by the realization that I've been doing work I hate for people I don't respect in pursuit of success that feels increasingly meaningless. So, what do you want? I don't know. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. I don't know what I want, and that terrifies me, because I've always known exactly what I was working toward. Build the company, honor my father, prove I was worth something. But now what? Now I stand in this garage and feel more like myself than I do in a corner office worth millions. Now I care more about whether you think I'm a good person than whether Forbes ranks me in the top 100 investors. She laughed again, quieter. Now I'm having a crisis at 42, and my brother is using it to steal my company. He won't win. You don't know that. I know you. You don't lose fights you believe in. Victoria met his eyes, held his gaze for a long moment. I need to go. Eleanor wants to prep me for tomorrow, run through scenarios, figure out our strategy. Good luck. Thanks. She turned to leave, stopped, looked back. Garrett, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in years. Fixing my car, talking in the shop, remembering what it feels like to be happy. That matters more than any board vote. Then we'll figure out the rest together. Will we? If you want to. Victoria smiled, small and genuine despite everything. I want to. She drove away as the sun set behind Chicago's skyline, painting the glass towers in shades of orange and gold, the city beautiful and indifferent to the human dramas playing out in its shadows. Garrett stood in the doorway of his father's shop, watching her taillights disappear, feeling the weight of tomorrow settling onto both their shoulders. Inside, Lily was doing homework at Wyatt's old desk. She looked up when Garrett came in, studied his face with those two perceptive eyes. The car lady is in trouble, she said. Yeah, baby, she is. Are you going to help her? I don't know how. Lily tilted her head, considering. Grandpa used to say that sometimes helping people means just being there when they need someone to believe in them. When did he say that? When Mom was sick. He told me that he couldn't fix what was wrong with her, but he could make sure she never felt alone. Garrett felt his throat tighten, memories of those last months flooding back. Wyatt sitting with Rachel in the hospital, holding her hand, telling stories about the shop, about Garrett's childhood, about anything that would make her smile. His father couldn't cure cancer, couldn't stop the inevitable, but he'd made sure she died surrounded by love instead of fear. Maybe you're right, sweetheart. Maybe that's what being there means. So you'll help her? I'll try. Good. Lily went back to her homework, the matter settled in the simple way of children who believed that trying was always enough, that intention mattered as much as outcome, that love was a form of fixing all its own. Garrett looked at the photo of Wyatt on the wall, his father's steady gaze looking back across time and death. Okay, Dad, show me the way. The shop was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic. No answers came, no divine intervention, no sudden clarity. Just the familiar space where a man had worked for 30 years, building something that mattered, proving that integrity was worth more than shortcuts, that some things were worth fighting for even when the odds were impossible. Tomorrow, Victoria would fight for her company, and Garrett would be there, because that's what you did for people who mattered. You showed up. You believed in them. You proved that they weren't alone, even when you had no idea if it would be enough. Friday morning arrived with the particular dread that came from knowing a battle was being fought and you weren't allowed in the room where it happened. Garrett opened the shop at 7, went through the motions of routine, checking fluid levels on the Bentley, ordering parts for the Range Rover, returning calls from 3 new clients who'd heard about the mechanic who actually fixed things instead of just charging for the attempt. But his mind was 43 floors up in a glass tower where Victoria was fighting for everything she'd built while her brother tried to take it away. Derek arrived at 8, read Garrett's mood immediately. No word yet? Board meeting started at 9. Could be hours. You know you can't do anything about it, right? Whatever happens up there is out of your hands. I know. But Derek was wrong. At 9:45, Garrett's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. It's bad. They're voting at 11. Need to talk to you. Can you come? Garrett looked at Derek, at the Bentley half-serviced in Bay 1, at the schedule board showing 4 more cars due today. I have to go. Go. Derek waved him off. I'll handle things here. Just bring her back in one piece. The Sterling Capitol building looked different in morning light, less intimidating somehow, just another glass tower full of people trying to justify their salaries and their existence. Garrett took the elevator to 43, gave his name to a different receptionist who looked at him with open curiosity, the mechanic from the South Side, the man who'd caused all the trouble, walking into the executive suite in work boots and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. Victoria met him in a small conference room, away from the main boardroom where her future was being decided. She looked exhausted, brittle, like she'd been awake all night running scenarios and finding them all equally catastrophic. Her suit was black, severe, armor against the coming fight. But her hands trembled when she poured coffee from the carafe on the credenza. Eleanor says the votes are already locked in. 7 board members against me, 3 abstaining, only 2 supporting. Victoria's voice was flat, defeated in a way Garrett had never heard from her. Nolan spent the last 2 weeks making calls, promising favors, leveraging relationships I didn't even know he had. This was planned long before yesterday, so what happens at 11? They vote to remove me as CEO. Cite cause as neglect of fiduciary duty, erratic leadership, compromised judgment. Eleanor's trying to negotiate a graceful exit. Let me resign instead of being fired. Preserve some dignity. Maybe keep a board seat. Is that what you want? Victoria laughed, hollow and bitter. What I want doesn't seem to matter much anymore. That's not true, isn't it? She set down the coffee cup too hard, liquid sloshing over the rim. I built this company from nothing, Garrett. Nothing. I took my father's life insurance money, $200,000 that was supposed to last me through grief, and I turned it into $2 billion. I worked 100-hour weeks, sacrificed relationships, gave up everything that normal people have because I thought building something mattered. It did matter. To who? The shareholders who'll be just fine under new leadership? The employees who'll get new business cards and keep doing the same work? The clients who won't notice anything except maybe a name change on their quarterly statements? To you, to your father. My father died happy, doing what he loved. Victoria's voice cracked. He died in that garage with oil on his hands and a smile on his face because he'd just figured out why a customer's Buick was making a weird noise. And I'm about to lose a company I built because I spent 3 weeks remembering what happy feels like. Before Garrett could respond, Eleanor Hayes entered, carrying a leather folder and wearing the expression of a lawyer delivering bad news. The vote is happening in 15 minutes. I spoke with the board chairman. They're willing to offer a resignation package. Full severance, you keep your board seat for 2 years. Non-compete clause that expires in 6 months. What does Nolan get? Your job. He becomes CEO effective Monday. Eleanor sat down, opened the folder. Victoria, this is the best deal we're going to get. If you force them to vote you out, they can remove you completely. No severance, no board seat, no transition period. So I resign and let my brother steal everything I built, or I fight and lose everything anyway. Those are the options. Victoria stood, walked to the window, looked down at the Chicago River 43 floors below. When I was 17, right after my father died, I made a promise. I swore I would build something he'd be proud of, something that proved his daughter was worth the sacrifice he made working in that shop for 30 years. You kept that promise, Garrett said quietly. Did I? Because right now I can't remember the last time I felt proud of what I built. I remember feeling successful, accomplished, powerful, but proud. She turned from the window. My father would be proud that I made money. He'd be horrified at what I became to make it. Eleanor checked her watch. Victoria, we need a decision. The words hung in the air, weighted with finality. Garrett watched Victoria's face cycle through emotions too fast to name. Anger, grief, fear, resignation, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. No. No what? Eleanor's voice sharpened with concern. No to the resignation package. No to the graceful exit. No to letting Nolan win without hearing what I have to say. Victoria's spine straightened, shoulders going back, the executive armor sliding into place. If they're going to vote me out, they're doing it to my face after I've had my chance to speak. That's a mistake. Eleanor stood. If you antagonize them, they'll what? Fire me harder? Remove me more thoroughly? Victoria managed a smile. I spent 15 years being careful, being diplomatic, playing politics with people I don't respect. What's the worst that happens if I stop? You burn every bridge in Chicago's investment community. Good. Maybe I need new bridges. Eleanor looked at Garrett like this was somehow his fault, which it probably was, then back to Victoria. You're certain about this? Completely. Let's go. The boardroom was oak and leather and floor-to-ceiling windows, designed to intimidate, to remind everyone present that decisions made here affected billions of dollars and thousands of lives. 9 board members sat around the table, Nolan at the head in the chairman's seat that Victoria used to occupy, looking pleased with himself in the way of men who just won something they didn't deserve. Victoria walked in like she owned the room, because until about 5 minutes from now, she technically did. Garrett followed, drew stares from board members who clearly hadn't expected the mechanic to attend the execution. Nolan's satisfaction dimmed when he saw his sister. Victoria, this is a closed board meeting. Guests aren't permitted. Garrett stays, or I leave now, and you can vote without giving me a chance to respond to your accusations. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, opposite her brother, forced him to look down the length of oak to meet her eyes. Your choice, Nolan. The board chairman, a silver-haired man named Peterson who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation, cleared his throat. We can make an exception for Mr. Rivers given the circumstances. Please, be seated. Garrett took a chair against the wall, out of the formal circle, but close enough to hear everything. The other board members, investment bankers, hedge fund managers, tech executives, people whose net worth required scientific notation, looked at him like he was an anthropological curiosity, a working-class specimen who'd wandered into their world by mistake. Peterson consulted a document. Ms. Sterling, You've been given the opportunity to respond to concerns raised by Mr. Sterling and other board members regarding your recent performance and judgment as CEO. The floor is yours." Victoria didn't stand, didn't gesture, didn't use any of the presentation skills she'd honed over 15 years of boardroom battles. She just spoke, her voice clear and calm and completely certain. "3 weeks ago, my car broke down. A Maserati Quattroporte that I bought to honor my father's memory, because he spent his life working on cars and dreaming about the ones he'd never afford to own. I took it to 50 different mechanics over 2 months, 50 experts with credentials and certifications in expensive shops. I spent $400,000. None of them could fix it." Peterson frowned. "Ms. Sterling, I'm not sure how this is relevant to—" "It's completely relevant." Victoria cut him off without apology. "Because what happened with that car is exactly what's wrong with this company, and exactly why you're making a mistake today." She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Those 50 mechanics all did the same thing. They looked at symptoms, they replaced parts, they charged me money, and they sent me away feeling like the problem was too complicated for me to understand. They were experts after all. They had the credentials. They knew better than some woman who couldn't possibly grasp the technical complexities of European automotive engineering." Nolan shifted in his seat. "Victoria, this is hardly—" The 51st mechanic was different. Victoria gestured at Garrett without looking at him. He listened. He didn't assume I was wrong about what I was experiencing. He didn't talk down to me or dismiss my concerns. He took the time to understand the actual problem instead of just treating symptoms. She paused. "Let that sink in." "And you know what the problem was? Every single one of those first 50 mechanics had made the situation worse. They'd fixed individual parts, but corrupted the system. They'd created layers of compensating errors until nobody could find the original issue. They'd been so focused on demonstrating their expertise that they'd stopped actually solving problems." One board member, a woman named Catherine Wolfe, who ran a tech company, spoke up. "I still don't understand what this has to do with Sterling Capital." "Everything," Victoria said simply. "For 15 years, I've run this company the way those 50 mechanics worked on my car. I focused on quarterly numbers instead of long-term value. I replaced people instead of fixing problems. I demonstrated expertise instead of admitting when I didn't know something. I built layers of strategy and compensation until nobody could remember what we were actually trying to accomplish." "That's absurd," Nolan interjected. "This company has grown by 40% annually under your leadership. Has it grown, or has it just gotten bigger?" "There's a difference." Victoria met her brother's eyes. "Growth for growth's sake isn't success, Nolan. It's just accumulation. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that our father didn't dream about me running a $2 billion company. He dreamed about me being happy." The room was silent. Garrett could hear traffic 43 floors below, the hum of HVAC systems, the quiet breathing of people who'd expected a defensive speech and gotten something entirely different. "You're right that I've been distracted lately," Victoria continued. "You're right that I've missed meetings, delegated responsibilities, spent less time focused on margins and projections and shareholder value, but you're wrong about why." "Then enlighten us," Nolan said coldly. "I've been distracted by the realization that I've spent 15 years building the wrong thing." Victoria stood now, not for dramatic effect, but because she couldn't sit still anymore. "I wanted to honor my father, so I became successful. But my father didn't care about success. He cared about integrity, about doing work that mattered, about treating people with respect regardless of their position or their bank account. She walked to the window, the same gesture she'd made in Garrett's shop, looking at the city below. When I met Garrett, he was 3 weeks from losing his shop. Everything his father built was about to disappear because wealthy clients like me decided that a 34-year-old mechanic couldn't possibly be as good as his legendary father. We judged him, dismissed him, took our business elsewhere, and he still offered to fix my car for free if he failed. Victoria turned back to the room. Free. No charge if he couldn't solve it. Because he believed in his own skill more than he believed in extracting money from desperate people. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Sterling, while this is very moving, we have a fiduciary duty to... To what? Victoria's voice sharpened. To chase quarterly numbers while ignoring whether we're actually creating value? To expand into markets we don't understand because growth looks good on paper? To treat employees like expenses and clients like revenue streams? That's how business works, Nolan said. Is it? Because I'm pretty sure business is supposed to be about solving problems for people who need solutions, about building things that matter, about creating value instead of just extracting it. Victoria walked back to the table, placed both hands on the oak surface, looked at each board member in turn. You want to remove me as CEO because you think I've lost focus. You're absolutely right. I have lost focus on all the wrong things. I've been so busy running a company that I forgot to ask if it was a company worth running. So what are you proposing? Catherine asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice, not hostility. I'm proposing that you vote me out. Victoria said it clearly, calmly, like she just suggested they order lunch. I'm proposing you give Nolan exactly what he wants, the CEO position, the authority, the ability to run Sterling Capital his way. Nolan's expression shifted from satisfaction to suspicion. You're resigning? No, I'm quitting. There's a difference. Victoria smiled, and for the first time since Garrett had met her, she looked completely at peace. Resigning implies I failed. Quitting means I'm choosing something better. Which is what exactly? Nolan demanded. I don't know yet. And that's the most honest thing I've said in this room in 5 years. Victoria pulled a document from her folder, slid it across the table to Peterson. That's my letter of resignation, effective immediately. I'm cashing out my 40% stake at current market value per the shareholder agreement. I'm walking away from my board seat, my office, my parking space, and the 37 keys to buildings and systems that I no longer want access to. Peterson stared at the letter like it might explode. Victoria, you should consider. I have considered. For 3 weeks, I've done nothing but consider. And I've decided that my father didn't work 70-hour weeks in a garage so his daughter could work 90-hour weeks in a tower. He didn't die happy doing what he loved so I could die miserable doing what I hate. Victoria picked up her bag, looked at Garrett. Ready to go? Whenever you are. Wait. Catherine stood. Just wait. You're really walking away? From everything? From this? Yes? From the next thing? We'll see. Victoria headed for the door, stopped, looked back at Nolan. The company's yours, brother. Congratulations. I hope running it makes you happier than it made me. She didn't attend his inauguration. 6 months later, Sterling Capital posted record losses for 2 consecutive quarters, but that was no longer her concern. She walked out. Garrett followed. Behind them, the boardroom erupted in confused voices, people demanding explanations, procedures, some kind of protocol for when a CEO just quit mid-meeting. But Victoria didn't slow down, didn't look back, just kept walking past the cubicles and offices and the life she'd built over 15 years of sacrificing everything for success. They didn't speak until they were in the elevator, descending from 43 to ground level, leaving behind the corner office and the title and the particular weight of being responsible for other people's billions. "I can't believe I just did that," Victoria said quietly. "How do you feel?" "Terrified, exhilarated, free." She laughed, and it sounded genuine, unguarded. "I have no idea what happens next. Neither do I." "Good. Maybe that's exactly what I need." The elevator doors opened on the lobby. Victoria walked out into September sunshine, into the noise and chaos of downtown Chicago, into a future that was completely uncertain and somehow more appealing than the corner office she'd just abandoned. Garrett's truck was parked 3 blocks away in a lot that charged more per hour than he used to make per day. They walked in silence, 2 people who just jumped off different cliffs and were still in free fall, waiting to see where they'd land. Victoria stopped beside the truck, looked at Garrett with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I should probably mention that I just walked away from a company worth $2 billion, I heard, which means in about 3 months, I'll have approximately $500 million after taxes and buyout agreements. That's a lot of money. It's an obscene amount of money." Victoria smiled. "Want to help me figure out what to do with it? I'm a mechanic. I fix cars. You're more than that. You're someone who cares about doing things right even when it costs you, someone who values integrity over profit, someone who remembers that work is supposed to mean something." Garrett unlocked the truck. "Where to?" "Your shop. I want to see Lily. Tell her that her car lady just quit her job and has no idea what she's doing with her life. She'll probably have better advice than most." "Probably." They drove back to the south side, leaving the glass towers and corner offices behind, heading toward a garage where a man had spent 30 years proving that honest work mattered, that skill was worth more than credentials, that some things couldn't be bought or sold or traded. They could only be built, one repair at a time, one promise kept, one person choosing to do the hard thing because it was the right thing. Victoria was quiet for most of the drive, staring out the window at the city passing by. Finally she spoke, her voice soft, almost wondering. "I haven't felt this scared since I was 17 years old, standing at my father's funeral, realizing I was completely alone." "You're not alone." Number Victoria reached over, took Garrett's hand. "I'm really not." 6 months vanished in the kind of purposeful chaos that came from building something that mattered instead of managing something that merely existed. Victoria's $500 million became seed capital for the Rivers Sterling Foundation, paperwork filed in November, 501c3 status approved by December, property purchased in January, a warehouse building 3 blocks from Rivers Automotive, 60,000 square feet of potential waiting to be transformed into classrooms and workshop bays and the kind of training facility that would give kids from nowhere the skills to become someone. The academy opened its doors on a March morning when Chicago was caught between winter and spring, gray skies threatening rain but holding off long enough for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. 500 people showed up. Former clients, local business owners, city council members who recognized good press when they saw it, reporters from Tribune and Sun-Times documenting the billionaire who'd walked away from her company to build something smaller and infinitely more personal. But the people who mattered most were the 23 students standing in the front row, wearing brand new shop uniforms with their names embroidered over the pocket and the Rivers Sterling logo on the back. They'd been selected from over 200 applications, chosen not for grades or test scores, but for hunger, for the kind of determination that came from having no backup plan, no safety net, nothing but the belief that hard work might actually lead somewhere. Maria Santos, 19 years old, single mother from the Bronx who'd taken 3 buses to make the interview. Joshua Grant, 22, former foster kid from Detroit who'd aged out of the system with $500 and a duffel bag. Amanda Foster, 17-year-old high school dropout whose father had been laid off from the same factory where Victoria's father once worked. Garrett stood at the podium, looking out at faces waiting to hear why this mattered, why some mechanic and some former billionaire thought teaching people to fix cars was worth $500 million. Lily stood in the front row next to Victoria, both of them smiling at him with identical expressions of encouragement, and that made the nerves easier to bear. My father built his first workbench when he was 16 years old. Garrett's voice carried across the warehouse, amplified by the microphone but powered by belief. He used scrap wood from a construction site and nails he'd straightened by hand because he couldn't afford new ones. That workbench is in our lobby now, refinished and preserved, and if you look close, you can still see where the wood didn't quite fit together. He paused, gathered himself. My father never went to college. He never had certifications until he was 35. He learned everything he knew by watching, asking questions, making mistakes and fixing them. People told him he'd never succeed, that he didn't have what it took, that he should give up and get a real job. Garrett gestured at the building behind him, at the 15 hydraulic lifts visible through the glass walls, at the diagnostic equipment that cost more than most people's houses. He didn't listen. And because he didn't listen, 23 of you are standing here today, about to get the chance he never had, to learn from the best with the best equipment, without worrying about how to pay for it. His voice strengthened. This academy isn't about producing mechanics. It's about producing problem solvers. People who don't give up when the manual says there's no solution. People who listen to what the engine is trying to tell them. People who understand that real success isn't about how much money you make. It's about how many problems you solve and how many lives you change. He looked at Victoria, who was crying quietly, makeup running, not caring who saw. My partner, Victoria Sterling, built a $2 billion company from nothing. She's one of the most successful investors in the country. But when I asked her why she wanted to do this, she didn't talk about returns on investment or market opportunities. Victoria's father had a dream he never got to fulfill. My father had a legacy he was afraid would die. Today, those two stories come together. Today, we honor both of them by giving others the chance they deserved. Garrett looked directly at the students. Some of you came here with nothing. Some of you came here with everyone telling you that you'd fail. Some of you don't even believe you belong here. But let me tell you something. 6 months ago, I was counting $8,000 in a cash register, wondering how I'd pay rent. A woman walked into my shop and told me I was incompetent, and I told her to shut up. Laughter rippled through the crowd. She could have destroyed me. Instead, she became my partner, my best friend, the person who helped me save everything my father built. Garrett smiled. None of you know what's possible until you try. None of you know how strong you are until strong is the only choice you have. You're here because someone believed in you enough to give you a chance. Now it's your job to prove them right. He stepped back from the podium. Welcome to Rivers Sterling Technical Academy. Let's build something together. The applause was thunderous, but Garrett barely heard it. He was looking at Victoria and Lily, both crying now, both on their feet, and that was all the approval he needed. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late September, exactly 1 year after Victoria had pulled her Maserati into Rivers Automotive and changed both their lives. The ceremony was small, private, just family and close friends in the garden behind the academy. Lily served as flower girl and ring bearer and unofficial master of ceremonies, taking her responsibilities so seriously that she'd rehearsed her walk 17 times and made Victoria promise not to cry until after the vows. Garrett wore Wyatt's watch, the one his father had worn every day for 30 years. Victoria wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. Carefully preserved across decades, Callum Brooks stood as best man. The dealership investigation had gone nowhere after Victoria's equipment donation made the whole issue moot, and Callum had kept his job, gotten a raise, and spent less time worrying about Sarah's student loans. Eleanor Hayes officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this, joking that she'd handled enough of Victoria's legal problems that adding wedding celebrant to the resume made sense. The vows were simple. Garrett promised to listen when Victoria needed to talk, to tell her to shut up when she needed to hear it, to fix what could be fixed and accept what couldn't. Victoria promised to remember that success and happiness weren't the same thing, to value integrity over profit, to honor the memory of a mechanic from Detroit who taught his daughter that oil on your hands meant you'd done something real. "You may now kiss the bride," Eleanor said. Finally, Lily stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. The laughter that followed was the sound of pure joy, of people who'd watched two broken individuals fix each other the way Garrett fixed cars, patiently, carefully, with the understanding that some things couldn't be rushed and some repairs took time. At the reception, Callum gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry simultaneously. A year ago, Garrett called me at midnight, asked to borrow equipment worth more than my annual salary, risked both our jobs on a theory that 50 experts said was wrong. I thought he was insane. He raised his glass. I was wrong. He didn't just fix a car that night. He fixed two people who'd forgotten how to be happy. And then he built something that's changing lives every single day. To the craziest risk taker I've ever known, and to the woman who was smart enough to tell him to shut up, to the couple who proved that sometimes the best things come from the worst situations, that second chances are real, that integrity still matters in a world that's forgotten what the word means. Later, when most of the guests had left and the caterers were packing up, Garrett found himself standing by Wyatt's workbench again, Victoria beside him, Lily, now 9 years old, almost ready for 4th grade, sleeping on a chair nearby with her flower crown askew and her shoes kicked off. "You think he's watching?" Victoria asked quietly. Garrett looked at his father's photograph on the wall, the memorial plaque, the tools preserved behind glass. "Yeah, I think he is. Mom, too. What do you think they'd say? Probably that I should get back to work. That there's always another car waiting to be fixed." Victoria laughed softly. "They'd say that I got lucky finding you. That some things are worth more than money. That the only legacy that matters is the one you build with your hands and your heart." Sounds like they were smart people. The smartest. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep, watching the last of the guests filter out, watching the sun set over a city that had seen them both break and helped them build something better from the pieces. When 50 mechanics said impossible, Victoria said quietly. One said, "Let's try." When everyone said, "Give up," Garrett continued, 2 people said, "No." And when the world said they didn't belong together, Lily mumbled without opening her eyes. They built something that proved the world wrong. Garrett and Victoria looked at their daughter, who'd apparently been awake and eavesdropping the whole time, who'd inherited Wyatt's wisdom and Rachel's perceptiveness, and had decided that pretending to sleep was more interesting than actually sleeping. "Bedtime, sweetheart," Garrett said. "Can I come back to the shop tomorrow? I want to help with the new students, of course." "Good, because Grandpa said the best way to honor people is to teach what they taught you. And you guys taught me that fixing broken things is how you make the world better." She stood, hugged them both, padded off toward the car where Callum was waiting to drive them home. Garrett and Victoria stayed behind, alone in the workshop with Wyatt's ghost and the memory of Raymond Sterling, and the knowledge that some legacies lived on, not in buildings or bank accounts, but in the people who carried them forward. "Ready to go?" Victoria asked. "In a minute." Garrett walked to the corner where the Maserati Quattroporte sat, preserved behind velvet ropes, a plaque beneath it reading, "Where it all began." When 50 said impossible, one said, "Let's try." He touched the hood gently, remembering that desperate night, the borrowed laptop, the 6-hour gamble that had saved everything. The car gleamed under the shop lights, perfect and whole, a monument to the moment when skill met opportunity and proved that some problems could be solved if you cared enough to listen. "Okay, Dad," he whispered to the photograph on the wall, to the memory, to whatever part of Wyatt still lived in these walls and tools, and the legacy they'd built together. "I think you'd like how this turned out." Then he took Victoria's hand, walked out into the cool September evening, toward a future they were building together. One repair at a time, one student at a time, one promise kept after another. Some revolutions started with a whisper. Some legacies began with a single car and a mechanic brave enough to try when everyone else had given up. This one started with "shut up" and ended with "I do," and that seemed about right.